the poor in India in general, be it Muslims or Hindus, they are not content. They're just surviving. But when it comes to Muslims, there's an added insult to the injury. They are not just poor, but they are the only poor people in this country who are abused, not for being poor, but who are abused for being appeased. They're the poorest people who are being abused and told that look at you, you are being appeased. Look at you, how much we have done for you. I mean, I think the whole this has turned the word secularism into a facade. Tell me, is the UAE a secular country? It's not a secular country. It's an authoritarian country, I suppose. Hindus are living in that country. A mob cannot just gather around a Hindu shop in UAE and pull out the owner and beat them up just because they are Hindu. But in the secular country where everyone, where you and I are equal, a mob can just gather outside my uncle's shop and they can pull him out and accuse him of any kind of crap and then beat him up, and perhaps he may also get arrested for it. When you make an entire section of population feel unwanted, when you abuse them all the time, it's like it's just like a classroom where all the students pick up on one student, and it's not that these students want to pick up on that student. It's the class teacher who's telling these students to pick up on that student if they want good grades or if they want to go to the next class. So this is very clear. Violence, hatred, and humiliation of Muslims is being incentivized right from the top. Imagine a Muslim person who's a poor Muslim person, a driver who was beaten up, and his family, while he was kidnapped, they saw that video. Imagine that family watching the video on their phone and knowing that the state is not going to help them. This is a feeling of helplessness and a feeling of despair.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. With the Prime Minister calling Muslims infiltrators and claiming that they have more children than the rest of us, we ask, what is it like to be a poor, ordinary Muslim in Narendra Modi's India? Joining me to answer that question is the independent journalist and aspiring documentary filmmaker, Alishan Jafri. Alishan Jafri, the truth is, Muslims are amongst the poorest, the least educated, the worst represented people in our country. Today, I don't want to talk about the minority who are influential, rich, and well-connected, but about the poor majority. What is it like to be a poor Muslim without connections, without influence in Narendra Modi's India?
First of all, thank you for having me on your show, Karan. To answer your question, I think it's a terrible feeling. The short answer is it's a terrible feeling. I think it's being poor in itself in India, whether you are a Muslim or a Hindu, it's a terrible situation. You are living a very bad life. But being a poor Muslim, if being a poor person is a crime, being a poor Muslim, I think, is a sin. You are constantly humiliated. Imagine people who work the most lowly paid jobs in this country, people who work mostly in the informal sector, a laborer, a plumber, an electrician, a cab driver, or some delivery gig person, them working for the whole day and then coming back to their homes and seeing the prime minister humiliate them like this. So it's a terrible feeling for Muslims, for the rich and elite Muslims. It's that there is a possibility. There's a discussion now in their homes that they should send their children out of the country. They have an option to go. But for the poor Muslims, they are like caught up in a labyrinth and without an exit, so they cannot go anywhere. So I think it's terrible to be poor, and to be a poor Muslim, it's even more terrible in India right now.
Tell me, Alishan Jafri, how does it feel when the Prime Minister of your country makes a speech and refers to you as people who have more children than anyone else, and then bluntly calls you infiltrators? What does it feel like to be called an infiltrator in the country where you and your ancestors were born, brought up, and die? What does it feel like to be an infiltrator in your own country?
I think the first reaction to this, my first reaction to the Prime Minister speaking in this way is that he's lying. And since he lies all the time, it doesn't surprise me. But this is a dangerous lie. And when you constantly talk about, Muslims, Muslim population explosion, and in those terms, it's the Prime Minister. I mean, I think it's a part of a complete sentence that is spoken by the Hindu right wing. On one end, the prime minister starts with this dog whistle that Muslim population, look at Muslim population, it's increasing, and zyada bacche wale log. Then you have people at the Dharam Sansad who give the solution. So when you constantly tell people, especially Hindus of this country, that Muslims are going to overpower you, they're going to overtake you in terms of population, then it becomes a dangerous situation. And then you have, on the other hand, people who are constantly giving you the solution. The solution, it doesn't sound to be pleasant, but the solution is that we need to control the Muslim population, or we need to bring it down. So if this kind of language, or if this kind of rhetoric that comes from the prime minister is justified, then in some years, I think the narrative of what is said at these so-called Dharam Sansads, that will be also justified, and it will be thought of as a justified response. But when you think about Muslims, they have nowhere to go. I mean, what do Muslims do? Muslims have been explaining, and they have been giving explanation that, look, this is impossible. It would take India's population need to reach that 4,500 crore mark for Muslims to overtake Hindus. But
let me not go on about Muslims overtaking Hindus. Let me ask you about that specific charge that they're infiltrators. These are people whose ancestors for generations have been born in India, brought up in India, died in India. These people themselves will die in India. Their children are born and brought up and will die in India. What does it feel like when their own prime minister tells them to their face in public, you're infiltrators, you're aliens, you're outsiders, you don't belong? What does it feel like? What does it do to them?
Karan, I think the feeling is that it's like a boulder has been tied to your back and it's eating into your spine. How do you respond to such charges? And especially when these charges come from the prime minister, it's humiliating. It dehumanizes you. It not only dehumanizes Muslims, but it also dehumanizes people who believe in these sort of hateful narratives. I think for an ordinary Muslim, it's become. I mean, Muslims have made peace with the fact that they will be mocked. It's like Muslims have, the spotlight is always on Muslims, and they're stripped, and they're standing in an open field where there are large loudspeakers and everybody is laughing at them. And this is a feeling of humiliation. This is a feeling of betrayal. We Muslims are equal citizens of this country, and to constantly use Muslims for whatever purpose, whether it is to win elections or for ideological goals, I think it's terrible. Because what have Muslims done to Modi? Why
Absolutely.
does Modi feel that he has the right to mock a group of citizens and also feel entitled to ask votes from people for this? If Modi was so confident, about it, he says that we have made India Vishwaguru. He says that we have reached the south. We have reached the south pole of the moon, and all those things. Then why do you need to spread hate against Muslims to ask for votes from Hindus? That's the
Let me
simple
raise
question.
with you something else that Narendra Modi repeatedly says at the moment, twice a day, every single day. The Prime Minister claims reservations for OBCs, STs, and SCs will be snatched and given to Muslims. What impact has this had on Hindu-Muslim relations? Has it made Muslims, poor, ordinary Muslims, apprehensive of the reaction of their Hindu neighbors?
Karan, first of all, be it Muslims or be it Dalits, both of these communities are marginalized. They are amongst the poorest communities in India, and on all social indicators, you can see Dalits and Muslims, they don't do well. So it's like pitting. It's for the first time when a prime minister is pitting the poorest of the poorest people against each other. And it's not only insulting to Muslims, it's also insulting to Dalits, that they have nothing except reservations. That is what Modi is trying to imply. And it is Modi who can protect their reservation. I don't believe that. In fact, I think Muslims and Dalits, they have had a good relation throughout, at least the last 30 years. Muslims have supported Dalits politically, and
But
Dalits have
tell me
supported.
this, has it begun to affect relationships between Muslims and Hindus who live side by side? Has it affected relationships in slums? Has it affected relationships in villages? Has it affected the way Hindus look at Muslims and the apprehension perhaps that Muslims feel in response?
I think the apprehension against Muslims, it has been there since like 20, if not 2014, then at least since Modi's second term. And there have been attempts every week. You have they come up with a new jihad. It's if there is some civic problem, you for example, take Delhi. There was a civic problem in Delhi, and these fruit vendors, there was a traffic jam because of that. So they named it fruit juice jihad or fruit ready jihad. Now the relationship between Dalits and Muslims, Dalits, of course, they don't have they need rights, they need reservation. And if you constantly tell that part of the population, imagine if our population, if 80 crore people, if 80 crore Indians, they're dependent on rations provided by the state. If you tell them that whatever you have is going to be stolen, and if you blame Muslims for that, of course you are sowing the seeds of animosity and you are dividing people. And that is exactly what he's doing. He is dividing people, and this is what the Britishers did. They divided people, and they divided people on the basis of religion. So if you're telling the poor Dalits, if you're telling the poor Hindus that whatever gold you have, I mean, imagine a prime minister saying, if you have two buffaloes, Muslims will take one. What does that mean? I mean, he's being serious. He's not joking. He's saying literally that whatever you have, half of it will be taken and given to Muslims. That creates distrust. Now, I mean, I think the whole this party speaks with a forked tongue. On one hand, they say,
Let me interrupt at that point. You put out in this connection a very, very powerful, heart-rending video on Saturday. You posted a video of an old man in northeast Delhi who, in a cry of anguish, asks, "Bataएं, hum kidhar jaएं?" It's a heart-rending, soul-destroying moment. How common amongst poor Muslims is that sentiment? How common is that cry of pain?
Just let me talk about that old man. Imagine a man who must, I mean, I think अपनी जवानी में भी उसने ये चीज सुनी होगी, पाकिस्तान चले जाओ. उसने ये चीज अपने बचपने से ये चीज सुन रहा होगा. And now he's in the last phase of his life. Let the poor man live in peace. You are always telling Muslims, go to Pakistan. You're calling them infiltrators. You're calling them, I mean, the feeling is that you're making them feel unwanted in their own homeland. You are humiliating them all the time, and you have 10 excuses, and then you have the gall to blame Muslims for this. Muslims have, they have shown extreme resilience. They have not responded they have not responded to any provocation. And then after all this, you are just mocking people. I think this old man, he must have faced it throughout his life. He's a poor old Muslim man. And this feeling, I think, not just amongst the poor Muslims, this feeling also exists amongst all Muslims. Whether you are a Shah Rukh Khan, whether you are an Asaduddin Owaisi, or whether you are this old man in Northeast Delhi, why are you always forced to prove your loyalty towards the Indian nation? At the same time, you are always humiliated for being a part of India. I don't think that this is acceptable.
It's not just the Prime Minister's comments that must hurt and pain. Ministers, MPs, MLAs, in fact, the BJP as a whole refer to Muslims as Babar ki aulad and Abba Jan. Repeatedly, as you said, tell them to go to Pakistan. They're accused of love jihad, land jihad, population jihad, and cow lynching. What impact does this have on their mental health, on their well-being? What is it doing to the psyche and the emotions of Muslim people, particularly the poor who have no connections and no influence? What is it doing to them?
I can talk about I live with both Hindus and Muslims. We share a space, and I can tell you my experiences with my Muslim friends. It's, earlier when it used to happen, like say 5 years ago, Muslims used to react and they used to act, and then they were angry about it. This anger, it has subsided. It's now just helplessness. And when you make an entire, I don't think Muslims are hopeless. They still have hope in the Indian nation, they still have hope in the constitution. But when you make an entire, section of population feel unwanted, when you abuse them all the time, it's like Muslim, it's just like a classroom where all the students pick up on one student. And it's not that these students want to pick up on that student, it's the class teacher who's telling these students to pick up on that student if they want good grades or if they want to go to the next class. So this is very clear. Violence, hatred, and humiliation of Muslims is being incentivized right from the top. And there is, I think, no better explanation for this. And
can I ask you this? Your analogy was a very telling one. It's like all the students in a class picking on one student, and not because they want to, but because they've been instigated by the class teacher. So let me ask you, has this begun to affect relationships with Hindus at the local level? Has this begun to affect relationships with your neighbors who may be Hindus?
Personally, I don't think my relationship with...
No, not yours. That of
Yeah.
ordinary poor Muslims. I'm asking you to speak on their behalf, not about yourself.
Yeah, I think, of course, in many places, people follow the prime minister as if his word is like the word of God. It's assumed that since he's the prime minister, he's supposed to be speaking the truth. Anybody who watches or listens to his speeches carefully knows that it's quite the opposite. So people who believe his word, people who think that whatever he's saying is true and correct, they would, of course, think of Muslims as enemies. And, this is not just the prime minister. His followers all the time, spread this fear that this Zomato delivery person coming to your home, check who he is. The person that you're buying juice from, check if this person is a Muslim. There's something called halal jihad, go local on Diwali, and all those sorts of things that create some sort of a wedge between Hindus and Muslims. There is, of course, Hindu-Muslim relationships before Modi came to power. They were not, it was not something ideal. There was a wound, but it's just like, you have put a knife through the wound and you're constantly twisting it. And I don't think that nothing good is going to come out of it. Locally, I went to Nu, and I was, when violence happened in Nu last year, you have given impunity to people to not just beat up people, but also broadcast that violence and make money out of it and become a creator. So imagine a Muslim person who's a poor Muslim person, a driver who was beaten up, and his family, while he was kidnapped, they saw that video. Imagine that family watching the video on their phone and knowing that the state is not going to help them. This is a feeling of helplessness and a feeling of despair. And on the top of that, you have a prime minister who's not going to speak up about it, who's not going to be sympathetic towards you, but he's going to find reasons to blame you for being in the situation that you are.
You mentioned Nu. Let me take you back a year and a half before that to December 2021. A Dharm Sansad was held in Hardwar, and there were public calls for a Muslim genocide, for ethnic cleansing of Muslim people. And the entire Modi government, from the prime minister downwards, kept completely quiet. There wasn't one word of criticism or protest from the government against the Sansad. What did that do to Muslims?
Let me
your own country calls for your own genocide and the government saying nothing.
Let me correct you. They were not quiet. Ministers, I think the BJP, many people in the BJP, I think it was one of the IT cell chiefs who came up with a edited video of Asaduddin Owaisi to do whataboutery. And this was from the UP election. So they want, every time there is something that can shake up people, that can, put this question in their minds that, bro, this is not acceptable. You cannot simply say that we can kill 1 lakh Muslims and we need 100 militants who can just go around and kill so many people. So it's not as if they were quiet. There are pictures of the administration. The people who were accused in this case, they went to meet the SP or some higher police official, and there's a video that went viral, and they said, "Ye to hamare hi log hain." They were laughing. So who were they laughing at? They were laughing at both the Indian state and the situation of Indian Muslims. And it's every word.
I understand what you're saying, but what was the impact on the Muslim community? What was the impact on poor, innocent, often helpless Muslims who have no contacts, who have no influence? What was the impact on them when they heard their own countrymen saying they want a genocide of Muslims?
Karan, just imagine people in that city. Haridwar is not a city without Muslims. It has a significant Muslim population. So let's not go outside Haridwar, but even within Haridwar, how would Muslims feel if somebody is just simply saying that kill them off? Not just, even they refuse to accept that Muslims are humans. They refer to Muslims as pests, insects, and in the most terrible, animalistic kind of descriptions that you can imagine. So it was it's as if it was a Nazi meeting. How do you describe people around you as subhumans or as animals, and then you say that we need to wipe them off? Muslims, of course, Muslims have not, even despite this dehumanization, I think Muslims still feel and they know that they are humans, and they're never going to accept that they are subhumans. At the same time, this is dehumanizing the people who are making those words and people who are listening to these words.
Absolutely. But the paradox, Alishan Jafri, is that despite the way they're treated, despite the way they're spoken of, Muslims are also accused side by side of being appeased. And yet the truth is, although Muslims are nearly 15% of the population, they're only 4.9% of state and central government employees. They're 4.6% of the paramilitary services, 3.2% of the IAS, IFS, and IPS, and perhaps as low as just 1% of the army. So what goes through the minds of a poor Muslim when he keeps hearing, "Sar pe chadha ke rakh diya"? He's a poor man amongst the poorest in the country, and yet it's being said of him, "You're appeased," or "Sar pe chadha ke rakh diya." What goes through his mind when he hears that?
I think what goes through a poor Muslim's mind is this, कि मैं 70 सालों से, लेट्स जस्ट टेक दिल्ली, मैं 70 सालों से इतने अच्छे एरियाज में रह रहा हूँ जहां पर सबसे अच्छी रोड्स है, जहां पर सबसे अच्छी सिविक फैसिलिटीज हैं, जहां पर सबसे लाइट कनेक्शन सबसे अच्छा है, वाटर सप्लाई सबसे अच्छी है। बेचारे साउथ दिल्ली में जितने भी हिंदू रह रहे हैं, जिनको फोर्स कर दिया गया है, क्रैम्प अप हैं हौस खास या ग्रीन पार्क और इस तरीके के इलाकों में, वो उनको उनको मौका मिलना चाहिए. दे शुड कम एंड दे शुड स्टार्ट लिविंग इन बटला हाउस. दे शुड ऑल्सो गेट टू विटनेस कि कितने अच्छे पॉश एरियाज में 70 साल से मुसलमान रह रहे हैं, और ये वो किसी भी शहर के वो पॉश एरियाज हो सकते हैं. It is a lie, Karan, and we all know why this lie is made constantly on, and the person who's making this lie from the top, who is Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi said that Muslims, if Congress comes to power, Congress will take away everything and give half of it to Muslims. On the other hand, he also said that Congress has done nothing for Muslims. He can say both the sentences in the same breath, and people will agree with both the sentences. So imagine a person who's on one hand being told that you have nothing, and then you accuse the same person of robbing everything because he comes from that quote unquote special community, and from that Congress ka special vote bank. So it's a dehumanizing thing to tell people that you have nothing and nothing has been done for you, and then tell them that look at you, how they have appeased you so much, and you have everything.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
This may be a difficult question to answer, but tell me, is it more difficult for poor Muslims in places like Bihar and UP to find jobs than it is for poor Hindus? Is it additionally more difficult because they are Muslim?
Karan, I'll give you examples. Of course, for poor people, for Muslims and Dalits, there's discrimination, and it's hard. It's harder for them to find jobs. Now, many Muslims, they work in the informal economy. They work as gig workers. They work as delivery workers. They work as painters and electricians, plumbers. Last year, let's take the example of Uttarakhand. This lady went on a spree to catch Muslims working in Hindu households, and she just said, "Look at these Muslims; they are a part of a conspiracy." And to go after people, an ordinary Muslim, for example, standing in a certain place in UP, you go and he's bothering you in no way, and you flip out your phone and start recording him, and you accuse him of thook jihad, and then you call the police on him. That sort of bigotry, that sort of crass behavior, indecency has been normalized. And an ordinary Muslim person, finding job or looking for job, there was a person called Ekhlaq went to, I think he went from UP to Haryana to find a job. And this was during lockdown. He had a 786 tattoo on his arm. This man, his arm was chopped off. His arm was chopped off. And then he went to jail. He went to jail and he spent almost a year in jail, and then he was acquitted. Imagine a poor person who has done nothing to you. He was accused of sexual violence, quote unquote, against children, and the person who was accused of chopping his hand off, they were they had accused him of this. So he was acquitted by the court. But imagine this person, and sometimes back, we had the chance to meet him and call him. So he's not normal anymore. He Imagine a person, a barber, just going to another city for work, and because of a tattoo, his arm getting chopped off, and then this person also goes to jail and spends time in jail, and he's not going to be normal. I don't think that anybody, and this story, this individual
Alishan, let me ask you a question that will be, I think, in the minds of the audience. They've listened to you. They're probably shaken by what you've said. They're certainly, I'm sure, very distressed by what you've said. But there's a question in their mind that I'll put to you on their behalf. From your personal knowledge of the Muslim community, are poor Muslims in India happy and content? Or would you say, how shall I put it, that they're just living and surviving?
So, Karan, just tell me, why would poor Muslims in India, the poor in India in general, be it Muslims or Hindus, they are not content. They're just surviving. But when it comes to Muslims, there's an added insult to the injury. They are not just poor, but they are the only poor people in this country who are abused, not for being poor, but who are abused for being appeased. They're the poorest people who are being abused and told that, look at you, you are being appeased. Look at you, how much we have done for you. I mean, I think this has turned the word secularism into a facade. Tell me, is the UAE a secular country? It's not a secular country. It's an authoritarian country, I suppose. Hindus are living in that country. A mob cannot just gather around a Hindu shop in UAE and pull out the owner and beat them up just because they're Hindu. But in the secular country where where you and I are equal, a mob can just gather outside my uncle's shop and they can pull him out and accuse him of any kind of crap and then beat him up. And perhaps he may also get arrested for it. So when you do this to a people, it breaks them down. And I think Muslims, despite everything, they have displayed great resilience. They've showed remarkable resilience. I mean, if you harass people and do this to a people all the time, this is what happens. I mean, I also wanted to last week I saw this interview of Asaduddin Owaisi with a famous news media anchor. And in this interview, Asaduddin Owaisi said that the situation of Muslims and the way Muslims are being taunted, attacked, it's similar to the Germany of 1930s, to which the anchor replied, look, do you think that if Modi comes back to power, he's going to brand you with a cross, or is he going to mark you? I mean, she meant the Star of David. My question to her, or to anybody who thinks like that, as long as there are no gas chambers, everything that is happening is acceptable. My question to them is, didn't the Prime Minister say unko kapdon se pehchan lo? Yesterday in Rai Bareli, a reporter was beaten up, and the reporter says that while they were beating me up, he's a Hindu reporter, while they were beating me up, he said they were calling me mullah because of the way my beard looks and because of the way I dress. They were calling me mullah, and they were calling me all sorts of slurs that I used against Muslims. So just imagine a poor person feeling that, the state is against him. This thought that, I think this should come from the Prime Minister. Instead, the Prime Minister should tell Muslims, no, we are not against you. We have nothing against you, and we don't think that you are going to steal buffaloes.
Alishan Jafri, we've come right to the end of this interview. And you're mentioning Narendra Modi, so let me ask you that question. What would 5 years more of Narendra Modi mean for the Muslim community? How do poor Muslims, Muslims who have no contacts, who have no influence, Muslims who are daily wage earners, how do they view the prospect of 5 years more of Narendra Modi?
Karan, in the last 10 years, the kind of humiliation, the kind of absolute horror and everyday abuse that Muslims have faced, right from the top to the absolute bottom, Muslims have learned to deal with it. And Muslims may be helpless right now, but they're not hopeless. And I want to highlight this. If you look at Muslims, they still celebrate their festivals. The other people, the Prime Minister may choose to dehumanize Muslims, but Muslims will never dehumanize themselves. So even if Modi comes back to power, Muslims are here to stay. Even if the oppression and even if the abuse and harassment and everyday jokes and taunts, they increase, Muslims are here to stay. This is a question that should be rather asked to the majority that votes for Modi. And they should be asked that even after 10 years of your neighbors being humiliated like this, why do you still vote for people who humiliate your friends and who humiliate your neighbors?
But I want to end on that slender note of hope that was part of your answers. Muslims know how to swim. Muslims know how to survive. They survived 10 years of Narendra Modi. They will survive another 5 if they have to. That is a small, slender note of hope. Let's clutch onto it because I think it's important. I thank you for speaking to me. I thank you for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.